Shawn is a good boy, he looks harmless, and his family of 4 is also happy and harmonious. Soon after, Shawn unexpectedly ended up in prison. Shawn was accused of killing his parents and was shaved before being taken to prison. Here, everyone is a serious offender, so it's easy to imagine the kind of people Shawn would encounter. They are all ruthless. As soon as Shawn arrived, he was suspended in midair. Once the inmates had their fill of playing with him, they removed Shawn's pants and mercilessly violated him. He endured this great humiliation and was at a loss for what to do. The kind cellmate kindly took off his own clothes to cover Shawn, but the warden simply ordered the cellmate to step aside. Later, he used a stun baton to wake Shawn up and told him that he would be released in 2 years. After this ordeal, Shawn knew he couldn't endure 2 years and pleaded with the warden to save him. However, the warden harbored intense hatred for someone like him. Life in prison is very bleak. Just when Shawn was feeling lost and miserable, his sister suddenly came to visit him. However, she looked nothing like the innocent sister he remembered, instead dressing and behaving like a spoiled brat. Shawn was taken aback by how much she had changed, especially when she spoke, and shocked him to the core. Because of this incident, Shawn's sister didn't get into high school, and their family's property was taken away by relatives. She came to tell Shawn that she was going to work far away, as a prostitute. This completely panicked Shawn, as he could barely protect himself, let alone his family. His sister left resolutely, carrying a rainbow umbrella in the pouring rain. But Shawn was about to face a turning point in his life. This man's name was Francis, and he looked like a tough guy. When the guards brought him into prison, he even reached out for a cigarette. Through the window, he saw Shawn being beaten. This wasn't the first time Shawn had been beaten, but this time he even smashed his head against the urinal. Francis couldn't help but take notice of his condition. It turned out Francis was a karate practitioner, and no one knew why he was in prison. However, as soon as Francis arrived, he made the inmates practice boxing for him. The inmates didn't take Francis seriously and refused to cooperate, and one of them even mocked his approach. Later, Francis instructed him to punch himself. Before everyone could figure out what was happening, the inmate was already knocked down by a punch. With this display of authority, the other inmates immediately began practicing. Seeing Shawn lying on the ground caught Francis's interest, and he voluntarily taught Shawn how to clench his fist. Then Francis demonstrated how to punch, and Shawn, without any doubts, followed his lead. But after being bullied for so long, Shawn's punches lacked strength. Francis brought over an inmate for Shawn to spar with. However, Shawn was extremely fearful, while Francis simply told him he wouldn't know unless he tried. The inmate kicked Shawn down, just like when they used to bully him. Then Shawn clenched his fist and threw a straight punch, miraculously knocking down his opponent. But soon after, Shawn was tied up and gagged, unable to eat the food in front of him. In the neighboring cell, Francis coached him, saying he could still practice punching even with his hands tied. He urged Shawn to practice with determination. In his mind, Shawn imagined himself freed from the restraints, standing in the cell, throwing powerful punches under the dim light. Francis told Shawn that each move had to be practiced 1,000 times, and if he practiced over 5,000 times, it would become a natural reflex. Shawn needed to practice diligently during the night. Shawn didn't disappoint Francis's guidance. In just a few days, he practiced with precision. Francis could tell just by listening that Shawn's kicks weren't fast enough. He insisted Shawn must practice at least 5,000 times. They were teaching and practicing boxing through the prison walls, and they lost track of how many days had passed. The inmates who used to bully Shawn wanted to continue, but Shawn was no longer the same. Francis had taught Shawn that fighting one-on-one was different from fighting a group of 10. Now facing multiple opponents, Shawn struck first, aiming for the vital points, and then quickly retreated. His goal was to scatter the opponents so he could take them down one by one, eventually targeting the strongest among them to make the others submit. Following Francis's teachings, Shawn's approach indeed made a significant difference. Those who used to bully him were now all defeated by his fists. However, drawing too much attention would lead to retaliation. At this point, the warden demanded that Francis dampen Shawn's spirit. Francis, of course, refused, but the warden knew about Francis's past attempt on the Prime Minister's life. He proposed a deal. If Francis was willing to take out Shawn, the warden would help him leave the prison early. When they started their sparring practice at night, Francis went all out, aiming for Shawn's vital points with every move. Shawn sensed Francis's murderous intent, and his survival instinct drove him to fight back with all his might, but he was still no match. Although Shawn was knocked unconscious, Francis didn't kill him. Later, Shawn successfully endured the 2 years and was released from prison. He was no longer the weak young man he once was. Afterward, Shawn dyed his hair blonde and got into the business of selling his body. As he watched a television program featuring boxing champions receiving awards, Shawn became determined to compete for the title of boxing champion himself. However, when a client mocked him and brought up the fact that Shawn killed his parents, Shawn snapped and attacked her. She collapsed to the ground, crying loudly. The experiences in prison had left a significant psychological impact on Shawn, and he refused to let anyone bully him anymore. Shawn left the client's house. He encountered someone on the street who seemed familiar, especially the 2 characters on the advertising sign. Shawn entered a bar to find her, but unfortunately, she wasn't his sister. Shawn tried to leave, but she insisted on holding him back to earn money. Shawn slapped her, injuring her face. She seemed unfazed, but Shawn's boss was very concerned. The client had complained to the boss about Shawn's attitude, so the boss sent thugs to teach him a lesson. However, before the thugs could even approach Shawn, he used his karate skills to defeat them. He learned from the woman that his sister's bracelet had been stolen. Shawn immediately chased after the thief, as the bracelet was his only keepsake. However, he was deceived as the bracelet was actually on the woman's hand. Shawn stumbled into a boxing arena, where his boss was also present. The boss signaled, and a large group of thugs attacked Shawn. Despite the severe headache caused by his brain injury, Shawn barely managed to fend off the thugs. While the boxing match on the stage was exciting, the real bloodshed was happening off stage. The boss, who was also skilled, personally subdued Shawn. Perhaps due to Shawn's interference, the boxers on the stage also started to throw heavy blows, resulting in one of them being seriously injured. As this incident went against the spirit of sportsmanship, the event organizers decided to cancel the match results. Bruce, the coach of the boxers, was also the president of the Boxing Association and was very displeased with the boxers' performance on the stage. Although Shawn was thrown out of the competition venue, he was still stimulated by the scene of the boxers' victory on the big screen. He led his friends to the thugs' place. With Shawn's current strength, these people were no match for him. When Shawn saw the bracelet on the woman's hand, he understood what had happened. His boss was once Francis's disciple. Seeing Shawn's fighting style, the boss recognized his skills and invited him to visit his dojo. The next day, Shawn followed his boss to the dojo, only to find that the people he fought with the previous night were there. The boss wasn't playing games with Shawn intentionally. He told Shawn that as long as he learned boxing from him, he could definitely regain the dignity he lost that night and even represent the boss's dojo in competitions. If Shawn refused, he would never have the chance to step onto the stage again. Just as the two were about to reach an agreement, Bruce arrived. The boss represented the emerging dojo, while Bruce represented the traditional dojo. The two were at odds, and Bruce intended to challenge the boss's authority. Bruce's strength was clearly superior. Seeing that his disciples couldn't even defeat an older opponent like Bruce, the boss became angry. He took off his clothes to compete with Bruce, but the power gap was too great. The boss was defeated by Bruce in less than 10 moves. Bruce took the opportunity to extend an olive branch to Shawn, claiming that if Shawn could defeat the boss, he could represent Bruce's dojo in competitions. It's quite clear that going against the founder of the boxing competition wouldn't end well. Since that's the case, Shawn didn't mind teaching the boss a lesson. Since both were students of Francis, their techniques were very similar, and it was hard to find openings in each other's defenses. The only difference was that Shawn's attacks were extremely lethal. The boss fell to the ground after just a few rounds, and the loser naturally had no right to challenge again. Bruce issued a stern warning, forbidding the boss from recruiting disciples under the name of the new dojo. However, the boss harbored a strong resentment towards Bruce, believing that Bruce only saw him as a tool and would discard him once he was no longer useful, lacking the true spirit of martial arts. After speaking, the boss still insisted on fighting Shawn, only to have his leg bone broken by Shawn's punch. Seeing this, the disciples took off their dojo clothes and ran away. From then on, Shawn's life took a different turn. As Shawn walked out of the gate, the woman was waiting for him at the alley with the bracelet. Shawn raised his hand and slapped her. The woman's name was Annie, another unfortunate soul in the city who had been away from home for 5 years, and her family had never looked for her. Due to Shawn's accidental encounter with her, she had fallen in love with him. Later, Shawn hugged her and kissed her. Meanwhile, Bruce was planning the next match. The next opponent was the Muay Thai champion. Bruce planned to send Shawn into the ring first, hoping he would be killed by the opponent. Then, his prized boxer would fight the opponent, ensuring victory. The media would then report that his dojo had taken in a socially abandoned murderer, giving him a chance to start anew. However, since he was killed in the ring, the dojo would seek revenge, creating a favorable narrative that would significantly increase the dojo's income. Shawn was completely unaware of this plan. He was still diligently practicing boxing to win the upcoming match. In order to increase his resilience to punches, Shawn had his friends beat him relentlessly. However, this superficial practice was not enough. Suddenly, a man appeared and knocked Shawn unconscious. When he woke up, he saw Francis sitting there. Shawn raised his hand to hit Francis, but Francis pointed at his throat. Francis told Shawn that simply enduring punches was not enough. In boxing matches, one must wear gloves, rendering previous training useless. One must learn to focus strength on a single point to attack the opponent. If Shawn could split the moon in the water, he would have a chance to defeat his opponent. However, no matter how hard Shawn tried, he couldn't do it. Seeing Francis silent, Shawn bit his arm and shed blood. A bloody mark indeed split the moon in the water. Francis didn't argue with him but allowed Shawn to train in his own way. The day of the match arrived quickly, and Shawn entered the arena, hoping to redeem himself. Representing the dojo, Shawn officially entered the arena, with his friends and Annie following on either side. Unfortunately, the big screen showed the news of Shawn's past that he didn't want to remember, news of him killing his parents. This instantly ignited the crowd's emotions, and people began to curse Shawn loudly. None of the spectators wanted Shawn to win. The Muay Thai champion had also entered the arena. Shawn began to be attacked with bottles of mineral water. The referee asked both fighters to stand in the middle, and the battle officially began. Shawn indeed couldn't withstand the attacks of the Muay Thai champion. The Muay Thai king lived up to his reputation. Shawn made numerous attempts, but unfortunately he couldn't hit the opponent's vital points. At most, he could only touch the opponent's mouth, while enduring countless iron fists in return. The Muay Thai king gradually began to underestimate Shawn, but Shawn seized the opportunity to strike him down below the ring. When they returned to the ring, the Muay Thai king's condition was clearly affected, and Shawn launched a frenzied attack. The Muay Thai king no longer held back. After all, his years of training in Muay Thai had honed his skills. One punch from him almost made Shawn lose consciousness. Francis told him that the next attack must hit home, anything else would be futile. In the second round, Shawn was knocked down immediately. In his weakened state, Shawn couldn't counterattack. However, when he remembered Francis's words, Shawn kicked the Muay Thai king in the head, blood spraying out, and the opponent could no longer stand. The match ended with Shawn's victory, but due to the excessively violent methods, the referee announced the match result as invalid. Shawn was enraged and attempted to rush to attack the referee. At this critical moment, Bruce took the stage to explain the situation to the audience. The doctor had diagnosed the Muay Thai king with permanent blindness in his right eye, ending his professional career. Bruce announced that Shawn would be banned from professional boxing for life. After the match, Francis and Bruce met. It turned out that Francis was also a member of the old-school martial arts school. Later, because of his assassination attempt on the Prime Minister, Bruce was worried that it would affect him. So he voluntarily reported it to the police. Bruce did it to protect his disciples. When the disciple was young, his family was very poor, but he had great talent. Bruce took him as his disciple and trained him into the current boxing champion. Although Bruce always talked about martial artists and martial arts spirit, Francis understood that all his lofty words were just for show. Bruce's mouth was full of righteousness, but his heart was all about business. Bruce just wanted to use others to fight matches to make big money. There was no need to make it sound so noble. A few days after the match, Shawn found the boxing champion's girlfriend by the pool, drugged her, and claimed that he violated her. He even used her phone to call the boxing champion, intending to enrage him and force him to fight against himself. Later, while Bruce was guiding his disciples in training, he unexpectedly took a punch and almost fell down. Because that night, Francis and Bruce couldn't agree and had a big fight. Bruce was seriously injured, and his strength was greatly reduced. Since Shawn was trained by Francis, Bruce simply ordered his disciples to kill Shawn in the ring. Shawn and the boxing champion were both actively preparing for the fight. Shawn even found Francis to teach him the ultimate move. However, Francis did not teach him the ultimate move. Instead, he took out steroids for him to inject. Shawn didn't hesitate, he started training right after the injection. This was also what Francis saw in him. Shawn's primal instinct was exactly what was needed for the match. A warrior without the desire to excel and overcome others would find it hard to break through and achieve results on the ring. In order to train for real combat, Shawn sought out fights everywhere. Unfortunately, the thugs used glass shards to injure Annie, and Shawn's arm was broken too. However, the doctors managed to save her life. She didn't go see Shawn even after her wound healed because his arm was still broken since that night, and it hadn't recovered yet. Shawn had no confidence in the upcoming match. He was basically in a state of semi-abandonment, and he blamed Annie for the injuries, pushing even his friends away. Shawn was indeed not doing well now. His mentality was off, and his body wasn't in good shape. He was on the verge of collapse. The only one who could help him was Francis. He was summoned by Francis to a bamboo grove for the final training before the decisive battle. It was Shawn's first time experiencing this kind of training, different from the brute force he used in the past. Francis told him that the only thing that truly belonged to oneself in this world was one's feelings. He must try to forget his own injuries from the bottom of his heart in order not to feel pain and to continue fighting. Shawn began to crazily strike his broken arm. He seemed to have truly achieved it. In his fully recovered state, Shawn started sparring with Francis, and in the process, Francis imparted the most important lesson: to hide oneself in the darkness to catch the opponent off guard. Shawn began to adapt to this new fighting style, relentlessly throwing punches at Francis in the darkness. Both of them were using lethal moves, but Francis still felt it wasn't enough. He brought up Shawn's killing of his parents again, continuously provoking him with words to force out his greatest potential. Eventually, Francis, who was terminally ill, passed away, and Shawn had reached a state he had never achieved before. Despite his heart being as tough as iron, Shawn's heart still cracked a little when he saw his sister. Annie told him that his sister had been overdosing on psychiatric medication. Annie had been helping him search for his sister all along. She had gone to the hospital yesterday, and when the police contacted the family, Annie unexpectedly found out about his sister. Unfortunately, she now didn't even know who Shawn was, and the doctors also found out she had a history of mental illness since childhood. When Shawn heard this, his eyes flickered, as if avoiding something. She was indeed mentally unstable now. The hospital staff wanted to take her back, but unfortunately, he killed the hospital staff, even suffocating his sister to make her faint, and even Annie collapsed due to a relapse of her old injuries. At this moment, Shawn only had one thought in his mind: winning the match. The appearance of the boxing champion drew cheers from the audience, while Shawn silently stepped onto the ring. At the beginning of the match, Shawn launched an aggressive attack, forcing the champion to retreat, but he couldn't break through the opponent's defense, and even the vulnerabilities he found were countered by the champion. Shawn's strength was still limited. Although it seemed like the champion was being suppressed, it was actually Shawn who was being beaten the most miserably. As the first round of the match ended, Shawn, with no one supporting him, huddled in a corner, enduring the bleeding from his nose and mouth alone. The second round began quickly, and the champion treated Shawn like a punching bag. Finally, Shawn was beaten to the point of bone fractures and was no longer fit to continue the match. He recalled the truth from years ago. His parents were killed by his sister, and Shawn, in order to prevent his sister from going to prison, voluntarily took on the blame, leading to the current tragic situation. Thinking of this, a surge of strength reawakened him. Shawn silently called out his sister's name, clenched his mouth guard again, signaling to continue the match, and once again engaged with the champion. Even though the strength of the champion was unquestionable, he remained the center of attention throughout the arena. Despite Shawn's lone courage and repeated battles, he continued to persevere. However, with the champion's final blow, Shawn could no longer stand, and the champion ultimately emerged victorious with overwhelming dominance. Yet, at that moment, Shawn tenaciously and unsteadily stood up again.